So it is a Sun and Cancer nation that, of course, loves mom and apple pie. But as I said the other night, it's interesting because the apple began in Southeast China, so the apple itself is an immigrant. And so our love begins with things that come to this country that aren't necessarily of this country, but of course we have a mythology that is very linked to indigenous people, love of the land, the myth that we are the Starship Enterprise and we welcome everyone. So we are up for a revolution because when our chart was formed in 1776, the planet Pluto was at late degree Capricorn. And for the first time in our governmental existence, it's going to be making a return. So that's the setup, and we have in office now what one might say is a sort of royal family, and which is deciding who's up there, who's leading, who's doing what, and now I turn it over to one of you guys.
Certainly agree with all that. There's a lot of plutonic energy.
Explain what that means, please.
Well, it's to do with Pluto, perhaps. So, of course, Pluto was discovered in 1930, which sort of signaled the rise of the atomic age. There's this idea that when a planet is discovered, it comes into our collective consciousness in a different way. It wasn't that it wasn't there before, that it wasn't active or affecting affairs on the Earth. It was. It's like saying, you know, was America there before anybody from overseas arrived? Of course it was. I think one of the reasons that Trump has been elected is that in the natal chart, the birth chart of the USA, the planet Uranus is at 8 degrees Gemini, and it's on the descendant, which governs relationship. And the descendant is where we personally look for qualities in others that we find attractive or that we want to aspire to or to include in our lives. Bernie Sanders' Uranus is at 0 degrees Gemini and Donald Trump's is at 17. So both those gentlemen had an almost exactly similar distance in the placement of their Uranian planet. What does Uranus mean in terms of its energy? It's about innovation, science, electric energy, disruption, chaos, revolution, often progress through disruption. It certainly represents the unexpected. With the natal placement of Uranus, I think there's a great respect for and a great longing for innovation in the American collective psyche. But I think at this time, particularly with the previous 8 years of logjam politics, that there was an urgent desire for change of any kind. Now, whatever one thinks about how that change is going to manifest is a totally different question. The point that I think is important here with Uranus is that it's change. It's not the same. It's not another 8 years of what we had before.
Right,
so
and
I think,
as you say, it comes into consciousness when it's discovered, and Uranus was discovered in 1781, just shortly after we were born.
right.
So we were anticipating this kind of revolutionary energy, and we have been acting on it one way or the other ever since. Because the 7th house, the descendant,
Right.
represents other countries in a country's chart, not
Absolutely.
just relationship. Let's let Jenny
Well,
get
one more
in.
thing, just one more thing about Uranus. The orbital period of Uranus is 84 years. It means it takes 84 years to go around the sun. Therefore, every 84 years, the planet is in the same relation to the sun and the earth as it was the previous cycle. 84 years ago was 1932. So, you know, history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. So, sorry, Jenny.
Well, that's right. I'm seeing this in a historic perspective. We have a revolution coming. And according to astrology, that happens in 2020. But we're already feeling that energy of enough already. It's logjam, it's bullshit, it's Washington, it's stuck. It's not working for us. And that kind of energy makes people want to change no matter what the outcome. Now, I think what's interesting is the Brexit exit and this election has a lot in common. It's wanting change, not thinking beyond what's going to happen, just a great need for some kind of energy coming in. Now, along with that, what we've got in the USA chart, when you move it forwards, and there's in astrology there's different ways to move it forward, but one of the ways that happens is in the US chart, Mercury goes direct, and it goes direct next year. And when that happens to a person in their chart, all of a sudden they stand up and they say, I need to be heard. I need to be great again. I need different. I need the world to understand that I'm a big power. Does any of this resonate?
Well, what's also interesting is when Mercury does go direct, it's going direct in the sign of Aquarius.
Yes.
Which our moon sign is in Aquarius, the United States, and that's part of the sacred energy. The sun, self-expression, is about the land, family, home, taking care of one another. But the moon in Aquarius is sort of very individualistic, very detached. It has a different energetic piece to it. But as we've been talking, and we'll talk a little more about this, when Mercury, the communicator, comes to the United States moon, the moon represents the people of a country, but it certainly represents the women. So do you have another question for us?
I do. Nice segue, Jenny, because you did mention a little something. I thought I heard you say something about Brexit.
Yes.
Yes, so you and Colin are both from a country outside of the United States. So looking outside of the US and Trump, what's going on with the UK and Australia?
Who wants to go first?
Well, the UK is, what's interesting about Brexit and Trump is it's both about immigration. That's what Brexit was about. They had enough immigration. They were told that there was about 30,000 refugees coming in from Ukraine, and it turned out to be closer than 300,000.
Wow.
In a very small country that's about the size of New Jersey. All of a sudden you couldn't get your kid into school. All of a sudden you couldn't get an appointment at the doctor. You couldn't get your kid into college because all of these people were coming in. And the same kind of fear has caused the revolution here. Now, go ahead.
I'm sorry, before I wanted to ask you, when you said revolution in 2020, what kind of revolution? There's an
We're going to
industrial
get to
revolution.
that. We're going to talk about that.
Maybe I'm not the only person, but can you just explain Brexit? I think I know what it is, but some part of my brain is saying, I'm not sure.
They had a referendum and they asked everybody to vote. Do you want to stay in the common market
EU, right,
or
right.
do you want to leave?
Okay, just want to make sure.
And that's why the immigration question was so important.
But isn't it true when they voted, they had no thinking about the future? It was in the moment.
And how about Trump when we
Right.
voted?
Right. There are a lot of people who thought, and you probably, most of you know this, a lot of people thought the ACA was not Obamacare. And so now they're freaking out because they depend on ACA, but they thought Obamacare was something else.
Yeah.
So.
What exactly does ACE?
The Affordable Care Act. It's, and a lot of people use the marketplace in the Affordable Care Act, but they thought Obamacare was something else. So they're all tweeting or complaining that, why are they losing their health care? You look stunned. But that's the soundbite world we live in, which is why it's so interesting, as Jenni says, that our Mercury is going to be going direct, because we have been getting messages in ways that people are not turning in the channels or seeing things crystal clear. And it's going to take basically people vetting, getting educated, not being really lazy about their information and really doing something more.
I want to just say about that, the communication is going to be so important.
Right.
Astrologically,
Right.
Pluto has been in opposition to America's Sun, and is now at the midpoint between America's Sun and Mercury. So I think that with every astrological energy, there's an almost infinite number of ways that can manifest. But where we've seen at government level control of the media, inhibition of whistleblowers or truth tellers, the president-elect's own attitude to journalists who ask difficult questions. I think we may see more of that. But at the same time, Pluto deals with elimination, revolution, and doesn't mess around. So it's very likely that at a local level, there'll be a lot more forceful, truthful communication. I think, in one way, the grassroots is quite hopeful. The government, not so much. Talking about Australia?
Yeah. I was,
Okay,
want to
Australia.
direct you over there.
All right. So I just like to make a couple of observations. Astrologically, the USA has a Sagittarius rising sign. Its personality is generous, expansive, welcoming, deeply religious and philosophical. The Australian nation has an Aries rising, cardinal fire, the youngest sign in the zodiac. So it's natural that we would perceive each other, that Australia would be a younger version of America. And interestingly, if you put the two charts on a bi-wheel together, the USA, if the USA looks at the relationship, there's a great potential for relationship, first, seventh house axis. If you reverse the chart and Australia's in the center, the axis is the same, but it's third, ninth. And what that would mean is Australia thinks it's got everything to learn from America, and America thinks it can teach or control Australia. That may or may not be the case. In terms of the coming revolutionary conjunction coming up in 2020, I think it will be extremely intense for Australia, extremely intense. There's what's called a stellium, which is a collection of planets, all in Capricorn, all in the ninth house of the nation's higher learning centers of investigation, research, and philosophy. And it's going to be challenged in a very big way. And it's likely to be quite traumatic for the people because the moon is in Taurus in the second house. And all this disruptive energy will play into Australia's core value, which is deeply conservative, although it's a very open country. Oh, and excels in sports, because it has Mars in the fifth.
Well, thank you. Westchester Holistic Network is interested in the symbolism of Neptune, which is often strong in the horoscope of healers and the people who need them. So I understand that Neptune indicates dynamic movements today. Can you speak to that?
Neptune has been in the sign of Pisces for quite some time. Now, all the slow-moving planets, Uranus, 84-year orbit, then Neptune, Pluto, and then we're looking at planetary bodies even farther out, like Eris, which Eris is considered the female version of Mars in aggression. So it's been interesting since she's been discovered, the sort of obstreperous or questioning energy that's been coming up, a lot of disharmony. But as someone said when they were, Paula mentioned the disparity, everything seems so black and white now. Sometimes when you have extreme polarity, that's what starts to bridge the place that we're all looking for. I mean, we basically, the dark does not exist without the light. So how do we balance these two and also get to know our darkness? So when Pluto, we've mentioned a couple of times, Pluto was the god of death and irrevocable transformation, shadow energy. Yes, atomic energy, 1930 when it was discovered, it was also the rise of awareness about psychoanalysis. Started to become a lot more mainstream. So one of the things we're seeing now is graphic in front of all of us. We cannot avoid it. The internet, everything that's showing us, all the wounds or stuff under the surface. And Neptune is the planet that represents the god of the sea. Our bodies are mainly water. Our planet is mainly water. We're the beautiful blue planet. It also represents the universal unconscious. So as we feel what it feels like to watch a refugee suffering, a lot of people want to tamp that down. They don't even want to feel it. So they want to pretend or make it go away. It doesn't exist. And that's part of what we're experiencing now, because there's no easy way to create boundaries. This is flooding us, whether we want it to or not. Child slavery and prostitution, things that nobody wants to think about, that are graphically confronting us all the time. And it's people who can actually feel, process, and recycle that energy, and people who work as healers, we do that all the time. One of the things you're taught when you learn any of the healing arts is not only how to create boundaries, but more importantly, how to be like a sieve so that things move through you, you witness, but you don't necessarily hold. So the other thing with Neptune and Pisces right now is Chiron, which is an entity that's between Saturn and Uranus, has been in Pisces. And we call Chiron the wounded healer. So this has been particularly acute as we've hit the year 2000 and beyond. So I'm going to turn it over to other people, because when I start talking about Neptune, floodgates open.
You get a bit Neptunian.
Oh, it's my Pisces rising.
When Neptune went into Pisces, I read a little astrology thing that said, all of a sudden everybody will want water. If you go to the grocery store, have you seen how much water there is in different, and now there's drinks. It used to be this much, and now it's that whole wall of different kind of liquids that you can, when this was 10 years ago?
Right. Yeah,
When Neptune went in. And I've, that never happened. People have never paid for water.
It's more expensive than gas.
It's more valuable than anything. Water is our...
Water's the issue, right?
Yes.
You were saying the other day,
Right.
literally Neptune is making us aware of our
Yes.
blue planet.
Right. Because without water, none of us can live or survive. So
And we
the
think,
illusion that we have it is ephemeral. We have to take care of it.
Yes.
and we think the flooding will continue.
Which part of the flooding, Colin? Oh, the actual literal
Literal
flooding.
flooding, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in Australia's natal chart, there is no water. The other elements are present, but there's no water. When you're light in one element, often it comes at you forcefully from outside. Well, quite literally, Australia is a nation continent surrounded by the ocean.
Yes.
Everybody lives on the beach, but there's no water in the chart. So,
But we,
was
think,
that
we think of it as a very dry place.
well, exactly. The land is very, very dry. Yeah, a lot of fire.
Is there a relationship between Neptune and Venus?
Yes, yes. Every time we discover a new planetary energy, astrologers get very excited by what the astronomers name it, although the international, there's another society, they don't think
Them, yeah.
them, you know, they get upset that astronomers name planets because they think that's their domain. So there's all these scientists love to argue too. So, but we get excited because if you're naming it something mythologically, it's bringing up, it's opening a new doorway in the psyche. So when Uranus was discovered in the late 1700s, was around the time Ben Franklin discovered electricity, and so that of course widened our communication spectrum, which has brought us to where we are today. So we consider, not every astrologer, because astrologers love to disagree, but many astrologers consider Uranus the higher octave of Mercury, and Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. Because if we're all tapped into how we're connected in the universal unconscious, our biggest connection is love. And that's another thing that people are always trying to put boundaries on. So you wanted to speak to that too.
I wanted just to say that with Neptune, it's what, 10 degrees Pisces right now. So it's in the first decan, the first third of the sign.
Right.
If you have water in your chart, if you have a water sun, or you have other planets in water, your dream life may be quite vivid at the moment, because Neptune rules Pisces, the sign that it's currently in. And Neptune is the planet of mystery, mythology, storytelling, film, social trends of imagination and the way those are expressed. Is anybody dreaming more than usual, more vividly? Right. That'll go on for a few years. Yeah.
Fabulous.
So, what are your predictions for 2017
Ooh, right.
and beyond?
Okay, so let's look at, we talked about looking at the Aries Ingress.
Aries, yes.
And
The
also,
Aries is the beginning of springtime. And for thousands of years, astrologers would look at that moment, which is the spring equinox, and be able to predict ahead for at least 6 months, sometimes the whole year. And don't forget, astrologers were once, associated with royalty, who wanted to know, what's happening out there. So that's why we're looking at the spring equinox chart, which is quite a chart.
and when we say it's quite a chart, basically one of the pieces is that there's a lineup of planets that are very close to the sun. So if we look up at the sky, we actually can't even see them because they're getting blotted out by the sun, or they're in sequence with the sun. So there's a lot of activity in that area that is, when the Aries Ingress is set for Washington, D.C., which astrologers basically consider the start of the new year because it kicks off the zodiacal calendar at 0 degrees Aries. It's very heavy on first house, America out there, being seen,